Well, good evening, folks. Joe Oddo with you for another episode of Citizens Alliance for Better Candidates. I am on the ballot here in South Carolina, 6th District, running against an entrenched incumbent. And that big party, man, they find ways to derail anybody who wants to rise up against them. And give you an example, this past week, we had a forum. Now, there's 4 of us on the ballot against the incumbent Democrat. And he's been there 32 years, so they know all the tricks, right? So even modern technology doesn't escape them. So we, the 4 of us, set up a debate hoping he would come. We are all there lined up, put an empty chair for him, but nobody showed up. What happened? The organizers sold the tickets, or didn't sell them, they were free tickets, but he put them on Eventbrite. And all 100 of them got bought up. And then none of those 100 people showed. Each of the candidates could bring some people. So the people that I asked to come, they said it was sold out, so I didn't come. But I brought a few, and each of us brought a few, and we conducted the forum without the incumbent. So that's okay. Now, usually I have a guest with me. I have 2 that bailed out on me tonight, so I'm going to have to wing it. Thanks again for all your fine attention. Let me just give you a few things that happened at the forum. We had a really good exchange, even though even the moderator was called to say, don't show up. It was canceled, So it was just amazing. And this goes way back to when I started a party back in the aughts up in Virginia. And we were out petitioning, the blockers from them big parties would come and interrupt people signing the petition. You don't want to sign that. So it's very undemocratic what they do, and we're not going to go away. They can keep trying that stuff. I mean, they're trying it with Jill Stein and Claudia De La Cruz and Cornel West. Anybody that wants to run outside of the parties, anyone wants to interrupt their gravy train of weapons makers who, let's blow up Gaza. Oh, that's not enough. Well, we got this Lebanon. We can blow that up too. Hey, more weapons. So it's just astounding that, of course, the big party can't roll over because that's where their gravy train comes from. So that's the challenging part. Now, I do have where's my prop? Oh, there it is behind me. So I took this prop with me the other day. It's called Citizen Power, a people's platform. That people were intended to run the country, not the corporate entities or the oligarchs, even though when the founding fathers, of course, were the elite of the nation when it started, and they didn't allow voters for voting for everybody, of course. Nonetheless, they had enough heart to realize that there was a bigger picture and that they could create something that would last. And it has lasted up to this time, and we have to protect what is there. So one piece that came out the other day at the forum was simply, we can't leave this to them. We can't just roll over and let them, own it. The scenario I painted was the RNC, the DNC had their big conventions. And in those convention halls, the rank and file folks were on the floor. Those are the folks that are going to go out and press the flesh and knock on doors and round up votes. But who was up above lining in the suites was the oligarchs looking down on. And here's a party that's saying, oh, we're going to raise money from the rich. Meanwhile, they're looking down saying, ha, nice try. Go for that. See how that works for you. So very interesting picture that we painted there. You really can't expect those big parties to cut their gravy train. And you can't expect mainstream media to do so either, because the fact that those 2 biggest fundraising operations in the world are going to raise and spend so much money they can saturate the airways and buy up all the advertising, well, that's pretty much what's going to happen. They can't, it makes you wonder, why would Archer Midland Daniels sponsor Meet the Press, and why would even a Raytheon, a weapons maker, sponsor, programs Good Morning America? Well, the reason is they want to make sure that there's no negativity on the idea of going to war. America has to be enthusiastic for going to war, right? So that's their objective, and they're doing pretty well. When I remember when Dick Cheney got in office, and he had a little secret meeting with all his cronies and said, "Look, you guys invest here in weapons makers and munitions and other oil, auto, and asphalt. We'll take care of you." And they sure as heck did, with an invasion of two countries, Afghanistan and Iraq. So that's what we've come to now. That's the situation we're in. And even now, it feels fairly empty with nobody joining me tonight. But we are out there putting up a good fight. I mean, we're not going to go away. And you got to give it to Jill Stein, who goes on those, Breakfast Club and places where they're going to attack the attack dog Democrats come after her, as if she only shows up every 4 years. Well, how often do the big party Dems show up? Republicans show up every 4 years, right? In the meantime, the Greens actually do run a lot of people at the local level. So we do organize grassroots. So they can't hold that against us as if, it's whatever excuse they can come up with to derail any third parties from making any headway. So hopefully down the road in this program, I'm going to have people from the other parties, like the Libertarians even. I hope to have one former national chair join me. I have invited quite a few people from Braver Angels, from StoryCorps, people like that. So we intend to keep putting out a really decent show for you. Hopefully you saw the one last week where we had two guys running for Congress, Ron Tupa and Dave Kennedy, and they really had some good insights. Before that, we had Robbie Wells, who's running for Congress in Virginia. Before that, Jim Rex, our chairman emeritus of the Alliance Party here in South Carolina and nationwide, actually. And Gail Forrell Parker joined us then, who was an early candidate for us in Virginia 20 years ago. She was actually on the ballot 10 times in a row. And even before that, I had a show. The first episode of this was with Pat LaMarche, who was the vice presidential Green candidate in 2004, who went around the country and stayed at the homeless shelters. What an amazing feat she pulled. And since then, she got into that business. She is a journalist and wrote a few books on the subject, and is still advocating to try to ease the unhoused situation we have. So then we have also that night Victoria Staten, who worked on the Perot campaign, and Kelly Lane joined us. So, I should have called her because she's always good for backup, helping us out, but she really had a great cause. Candidates for Assange. So she invited me on there, and I got to meet Matt Ho on the Zoom, and really, important work that he did last year when or 2 years ago when they knocked him off the ballot in North Carolina. And they did it with, their army of litigators litigators and attorneys, lawyers, who were basically taking the petitions that Matt turned in and calling and knocking on the door of those folks who saying, "You didn't really mean to sign this for the Green, did you?" And they were trying to get people to unwind their signature. I mean, they will stoop to nothing to interfere. Getting elected is their highest priority. So, when that happens, like this 32-year-old incumbent, is he really looking to make any headway at all in any legislation? He'll come out to the district and say things like, "Well, we got I got $100 million for this bridge." Well, of course, you're the rep for this area. Of course, that's the least you could do. But that's not exactly promoting legislation or getting things done. So I was trying to reach, sorry, I was trying to reach the person that was supposed to be here tonight. So let's see what we got. No equal playing field for us independents, right? You folks realize that when you say you haven't heard of us, of course you haven't, because no lamestream media is going to pick us up. We're not going to be featured, that because again the two parties see it that way. But if the incumbent would honor, say, a term limit, we'd have had 3 different people in that office by now. And that's one of the things our alliance party is going to do differently. We're going to have citizens run honorably, transparently, with the objective of serving. We don't need to stock advanced knowledge or what stock to sell because we're going to pass a piece of legislation. The ethics there is highly questionable. And of course, it trickles even higher than that. I mean, you've got to wonder, how is the Supreme Court actually going to enforce ethics voluntarily on themselves? We know that's not going to happen either. So we, in general, are in favor of term limiting those folks too. So, but think about it. What are some of the issues? I mean, to those of us running outside, we know that it's a systematic problem, that we need to simply change the way elections are run. Here's an example. Why shouldn't the person that has their proper ID, they show up at the right polling place on election day, why can't they vote, whether they registered or not? They're at the right place. Let them register on the spot. That's called same-day voter registration. Simple to do. That's simple. Another thing we can do is the primary. We had one big Jewish lobby spent, was it $20 million to get rid of 2 people in the primaries? Because why? These folks were trying to call out the genocide that's going on, and so all of a sudden they got primary, which is the way to get rid of who you don't like. Of course, both parties do it, but you realize that they spent $20 million just on primaries. There's something extremely wrong with that kind of stuff happening. I mean, it's such a case for campaign finance reform and underwriting candidates like us that just want to get on the ballot and serve the public. So it shouldn't be such a high bar that we need $1 million to even be considered as a contender in a race. So these are things that I think the public needs to get behind. We keep coming around and reminding folks that this is the way it was designed. The Constitution was designed not for corporations to be persons, but the persons, the people, to have say over the last say over the 3 branches of government. In other words, yes, they did separate the powers between the executive, judicial, and legislative branches, but there's nobody checking each other anymore. Now you basically let the Supreme Court have their way. Any legislation that the legislative side, Congress, passes, like even if they try to enact term limits, would the Supreme Court shoot that down? I mean, that would cause quite a contentious situation up there in Washington. So if the legislators were really doing their job, they would look into that and figure out how to end the bitter partisanship, the bought and paid for by the MAGA right Supreme Court that we have right now. To allow an immunity for an ex-president, that's a dangerous precedent, folks. And we should be paying attention to some of those precedents. some of them court cases like the one that shot down regulations that the APA and other regulatory agencies, I mean, these are the experts. They're the ones that know. So you're going to put it back into the courts to say, well, we are going to be the ultimate decider. How is it that they all of a sudden they have scientists to figure out things? I mean, that's just wrong in so many ways. You know, so what's the point of the government if we're not going to have regulation? Well, some more of the election reform stuff. Now, I have a 10-point national election reform platform, and that is basically, it's got some good stuff in it. We talked about the same-day voter registration, also fair ballot access. I was able to get on the ballot without that much trouble here in South Carolina, but in other states, it's a lot harder. Like when I lived in Virginia, we had to get 1,000 signatures, and there's a guy that has a program, Stephen Leon, on this network, who didn't make the number he needed to get on the ballot. So let's just ease those ballot act restrictions for one thing. Let's also give the citizens of DC the right to have a representative in Congress. Why not? I mean, if we don't care about those folks, then we don't even care about our own folks locally, right? So we should care about all of the country and make sure that we get things like that done. And speaking of caring, that budget that they just pass another stopgap, another continuing resolution, so they're committed not to putting their heads together and not working it out. I mean, for what, 200 and some years, there was compromise. There were two sides getting together and had a conference committee to work out the budget and actually have it for the year, every year, fiscal year, so that they didn't have to have stopgaps, and so they didn't have to have the threats of government shutting down. That's just such a sloppy way to do business. It's costing us a lot of money in the debt because we're not addressing the debt, and that national debt is a scary sight. That is getting bad. I mean, you know, we're talking 120% of our GDP or something crazy like that is the debt itself. That's just unmanageable. And it's, look, the budget should be a statement of our values of our country. And the fact that we are leaving that kind of mountain of debt onto future generations, that's an embarrassment. And that is not a statement of value. That's a statement of we don't give it, right? So that's a shame. You know, we're unloading those, we're loading up the future generation with such enormous debt, and all the members of Congress can do is blinders on. What do I have to do to get reelected? Not get primary. That's all. You know, that's what they would live for. So of course, last week's program, Dave made a good point. Dave Kennedy, who said, you know, those of us running outside of the big two, unless we catch lightning in a bottle, it's pretty slim chance we get elected. And he's right, which means that sometimes the nuances of the policies, like even if they had us in a debate and they asked us about X, Y, and Z policy, is that really relevant to us and the reason we're in the race and the reason we're asking you not to waste your vote on either of the two parties? No, see, we have a bigger long-term strategy, like a chess match. It's strategy, right? You play strategically. So we are asking you to cast that vote outside of the big two to let them know that you're not just going to roll over for the lesser of two evils, that you actually want a choice. And we can have a choice if we had 3 or 4 people on the ballot, which we have 5 people on the ballot. If we had a ranked choice, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we could select. And then here in South Carolina, if 2 of them don't get the top 2 don't get a majority, then they have a runoff. Well, the ranked choice flips to an instant runoff. So the people that didn't get enough votes, number 5 in this case, on the ranked choices, would get knocked off, and the 2s would be counted till somebody got a majority. So that type of election reform is highly needed. And it would do a lot to reduce the negativity. It seems like that's all there is in campaigns anymore is negativity. It would also because when say the libertarian that was at the forum with me the other day, and he and I agreed on getting rid of the income tax, for instance, the replacing it with a fair tax was my idea. He had a different idea, but in general, we could be out there asking folks, look, and if you can't vote for me first, vote for me second. Andrew Yang ran on that in New York, but he ran out of time because people had to be registered to vote 2 months before the election. Again, same day voter registration, people could have registered and voted on the election day. So these little fixes can go a long way. There's a few other things in that national election reform platform. You can see more at my website, bettercandidates.org. So what else can we talk about? The let's see. People ask me, how are we going to balance the budget? There's two simple ways to do that. You bring the troops home who aren't in a combat zone, which we really aren't. I mean, maybe they're in Iraq defending the oil fields and a few hot spots like that. But in Germany and Japan and places where we don't need thousands of troops, bring them home. We can build infrastructure. Those folks will be happy to work at home and have their families nearby. So that's one way, because you're talking about billions of dollars that can come back home. The second thing is, well, the infrastructure, as I talked about, but the other thing is corporate welfare. I mean, the lobbyists and litigators are out there with, I know there's good and bad in every industry, right? And I'm not picking on lobbyists or lawyers per se, but the lobby industry itself gets a really healthy return. On about 220 million, they get about $1 billion return on their investment in legislators. So in other words, favorable legislation, corporate welfare. But you never hear that in the mainstream media, because why? Again, goes back to that, where they get their source of funding. We are using billions to prop up this empire and build, and just blow people up around the world. It's really embarrassing, and it needs to stop. We, the people, can't be the ones who are allowing our tax dollars to rain bombs on innocent civilians. I mean, sure, there had to be a response, and we fully would have expected Israel to have a response, but not one that took their apartheid and turned it into genocide. That's just so there are plenty of things we can invest our resources in. We are a rich enough country. We could eliminate homelessness and poverty. We can invest in clean energy, lead pipe, get rid of that lead in the water, and provide everybody of clean water. We can even make sure that the soil that we're not losing soil. We can replenish that, get some poisons out of our food. There's so many things that you only hear from the independents. Obviously, knock on the door or ring up your legislative aide for your congresspeople or state house people and ask them, what are they going to do about these issues? And they don't have any answer. Nobody really, they're not trying to transition away from the big polluters. Because why? These big polluters control the EPA, the big pharma, the CDC, the FDH, the NIH. I mean, when the corporations have their own people in the regulatory agencies, we know we're not what the answer is going to be when we ask for some regulation, right? That's probably not going to be anything. So it's a tough fight, but we got to keep on going. I mean, the commitment to transparency too is something I failed to mention. The alliance people that run on our party, we have our candidates sign a pledge that says we're going to reveal our economic. our economic disclosure to where we're earning our money, what we're invested in, and we're also going to sign a term limit pledge for 12 years. That's it. Time to move on. Let another look, there was a forum the other day. All four of us could have done just as well as that sitting congressman is doing. We're all intelligent enough to do this job. So the fact that you have to have some kind of credential of being in office forever, that's hogwash. That doesn't, we don't buy that. You know, the boatloads of money is what it's all about. Those folks get rewarded because they can raise the most money. That's not how the system was to be set up. And the individual who was supposed to join me tonight, I would mention his book, but since he didn't show up, I'm not going to give him any plug. But he did have a good idea about Washington's farewell address and the fact that he warned us about partisanship and factions like this. So I ask you folks, get on board. Actually, anybody that wants to help me with the revamp of this book. See, I am actually crafting an updated version of this. This was written in 1972. Mike Gravel, a hero of mine, former senator from Alaska, who is most famously known for reading the Pentagon Papers into the record of the Senate at a great risk of being arrested. Well, this book does have a platform that says, here are things we should fix. Here are ways that the people can reclaim their reign on government and wrestle it back away from the corporate interests. And so that's what we need to do now is anybody that wants to help me pitch in on this, I'm accepting essays. I got about 42 written so far. So we're going to have this done by December. So if you get with me between now and then, if you want to put some input into this, I welcome that. We are accepting, here's my website again, bettercandidates.org, but you can email me directly at bettercandidates@gmail.com and we'll start a dialogue. Hopefully, if you know anybody that has, strong opinions, good writing, good essays, feed them my way. You can check me out on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the usual places. Although Twitter has become kind of out there, that's just rants all day. It's hard to be in spaces like that. And here's the objective of this, and the reason I wanted to do this every week between now and the election, and have some good, relevant people on with me. We basically want to flip the script on the standard media narrative that the big two political parties, they're the ones actually spoiling elections for us. They call us spoilers, but how do you spoil something that's already spoiled? So rather than, keep going the way it's going, we're asking folks, like John Connally, he was the guy that was riding with Kennedy in the car the day he got shot. He was a congressman. He says, look, it would be wise for people to spend 10% of their time in politics, because you can be assured that the politicians are spending 100% of their time in your business. We got to put an end to it, folks. Hit me up, bettercandidates.org. Thanks again for tuning in. And sorry I didn't have a guest, but tune in next week. We expect to have some really good guests between now and the rest of the election. Peace.